Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about how to describe a health community or population in APA style. Now, this is one of a larger series of webinars that we have for the HCAD program. So if you go to our Online Writing Center webinar page, scroll down to the tab Guide, select HCAD, you'll see everything sequentially. And do be aware that HCAD is one of those programs that has both undergraduate and graduate level courses, so you might have to scroll past a few if you're taking this as a graduate student. Alright, so our agenda today, we're going to be looking at HCAD 605's Week 1 assignment, specifically the part where you are describing a population. There's a mind map section there. If you're interested in that, we have a webinar about doing mind maps already. Just go to our Writing Webinars page and search for mind map, and that'll take you to it. Alright, we're going to look at this assignment. We're going to talk about what exactly it's asking you to do, and then we're going to look at how to do some of that in APA style. And we're going to finish with a discussion of how to outline and draft your assignment. Alright, so let's take a look at this. So this is coming from the HCAD 605 course. This is the Community and Population Health, Transforming the Healthcare System. I think everyone agrees that there's a lot of room for improvement in healthcare systems all over, and the United States is no exception. So let's talk about what that might look like. And part of that, what this assignment focuses on, is identifying a public health community or population. This is a group that has particular needs, and how large or how narrow you define it will have a lot to play in how you describe it. More on that in a little bit. So this assignment description begins with a sort of preamble, an overview. During this course, you will complete a large culminating assignment utilizing a community or population of interest. The definitions of community and population within public health are very similar, so they will be used interchangeably within this course. Now, it is important to keep in mind that when you are defining a population in the research sense, like if you are reading through scholarly literature, talking about a study that was done, there is this specific language of using population to refer to the larger group from which a sample, the people that you actually get data from, is recruited. So sample is a small group that you get data from directly. Population is the larger thing that the people in your sample should be representing, so that the data you collect tells you something about that population. Now, if that's something that you are particularly interested in the research aspects, take a look at some of our dissertation and doctoral project focused webinars. They have their own tab. Let me go back and show that. So that's the third to last tab there, dissertations and doctoral projects, and so we go into some of the research aspects. But for this assignment, as I say, community and population, it's basically a way of indicating, hey, here's this particular group that we are interested in, looking at this as an entity that has its own needs, its own desires, mores, etc., that might affect how exactly healthcare is delivered, and particularly public health. All right, now, here we have a description here. A community and population are groups who share similar characteristics. Those characteristics may be related to geographic location, culture, language, interests, or values, etc. The members of these groups share a common reality of living and working, and are often influenced by the social, economic, and physical risk factors in an environment. So this is telling us in part that whatever group you select for this assignment, it might not be bounded by all being in the same place. Or they might be all in the same place, but not all the people of that place, or it might be a group that has been scattered. Later on, you'll hear me talking about the Hmong people who, in the United States, this is a community or a set of communities that came over from Southeast Asia in the 1970s mostly. And there are large communities in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Twin Cities of Minnesota, and there are also communities in places like Merced, California. Now these are separated by geography, but especially if we look at the older members of the community, there is a lot of similar characteristics. More on that in a little bit. So, common reality of living and working. All right, this continues, some examples may include a neighborhood, a state, an age range, such as pediatrics or older adults, a disease process, like cancer, diabetes, having cardiac disease, being homeless or unhoused, uninsured, an ethnic group. And then there's a suggestion here about a YouTube video that you can view, which is a good way to get a brief introduction to this topic if the social determinants of health are something new to you. Now we move into the main instructions for this. So we have the instruction to go take a look on the ACU Library Distance Learning Portal and to create and submit a mind map. Now, we're not going to be focusing on the mind map. We're going to be focusing on that 500-word APA formatted summary of this population or community that you're choosing to study, and that you should include 2 or 3 scholarly resources for the information. You can reference the content page that walks you through how to create a mind map, or use any program you want. But when you select that community or population from the course textbook, from another course that you studied, or something that you are aware with through your work, the basic idea is that this is something where you'll have some familiarity with it starting out. We have had some students with assignments like this who look for something that's entirely new to them because they have a professional interest. Usually it's someplace they want to move or work or go back to. But the general idea is, okay, let's find a community where you won't be just encountering it wholly new for the full time. And so for this assignment, you're going to be submitting your topic for approval for your project, starting with describing the community or population of interest. Alright, so this instruction is about the mind map. We're going to pass over that because it's not our focus and because you can watch a webinar on mind maps. And we're going to look instead on these instructions for that 500-word paper. Now, a question I get all the time is, well, how long is 500 words? Well, here's a good reference. If you're using our APA course paper template, then you'll be writing 12-point font, Times New Roman, double spacing. With that, one full page of text is going to come up to about 250 words. So this isn't counting the title page, this isn't counting the references. 2 full pages of body text will be approximately 500 words. So that's what we're looking at. It's not long, but it's sufficient to go into some detail for each of these prompts here. And we see here first, okay, state the community or population you wish to use for your culminating assignment. Give us a brief background of the community or population. Describe the current state of health of this community or population. And illustrate the impact of health disparities for this. Now that last one is one where that prior familiarity is helpful because it gives you an idea of where to look or what things to go looking for. And if we look at the criteria for this, the rubric assigning the grade, we see that a third of the points are for the mind map and the mind map doing the things it's supposed to. And then the rest of the points, 2/3 of the grade for this assignment, come from writing that 2-page paper and having it be formatted in APA style with a reference page with at least 2 or 3 sources. You don't really need for something like this to be doing more than this. If you want to use more, check it with the instructor. That's always a good idea when you want to go above and beyond. Now, let's look at how to describe a community or a population in APA style. Well, first thing we need to do is have an idea of where we should go looking. And in this, in general, if we're looking for something like the size of this community or who's in it, usually the ranking goes, let's start with the official government statistics, then look at secondary literature, which could include a journal article or a book, and then look at tertiary literature. So it's something like an encyclopedia entry would be considered tertiary or quaternary literature. So we want to avoid that. Look for government statistics if it's available, and if not, look at secondary literature. Now, there might be, for some particular communities, for example, my background includes doctoral studies in ethnomusicology. There might be a community where someone's first-hand account is the best place to get information. But if it's like how large this group is, one, it probably ages less well than government stats that are updated regularly. And second, there's questions that people may ask about, well, why was this the best or worst to use for that? So if you do use a primary source like that, someone there and said, oh, there are 500 people here, you'd want to explain why that was the most accurate count. Why you're using that source instead of something that looks more authoritative. But in most cases, the government stats will be the primary source for something like size. Now, there might not be federal government, it might be state or local government, more on that in a little bit. But you want to ask yourself, okay, what is going to be the most relevant, most accurate, and up-to-date source for this information I'm going to present, which could be about more than just the community size. And for populations, ask yourself where and how are they described in detail? Are government sources available? What about scholarly sources? Are there books or journal articles? This is important because the best source might end up being a book that describes in great detail, perhaps was written about the struggles or challenges that this community or population faces. All right, now let's talk about how you might cite your sources or refer to them in APA style in your references list. And because of the variety of different populations and communities that you might be considering, we have a variety of sources that you might be, source types you might be having to cite and reference. But whatever it is, it's going to follow a couple basic rules for APA style. Your reference should say who wrote it, when was it published, what is it called, and how do you find it. So for example, a journal article, you have the author, M.J. Valencia. When was it published? The year 2007. What's it called? The East China Sea Dispute, Context, Claims, Issues, and Possible Solutions. And how do you find it? Why, you grab the journal Asian Perspective, Volume 31, Issue 1, pages 127 to 167. Or perhaps you are using a YouTube video. Well, what's the channel name? Jeremy Johns. That's who wrote it or who made it available. When was it published? Well, YouTube tags all these things by year, month, and day, in part because sometimes people will be reusing the same title like Daily Update, and so having that month-day thing is really important. What's it called? Reminiscence Movie Review. We have a little note because it's a video saying that it's a video. How do you find it? Oh, you go to YouTube, the platform, and that specific URL. So you can see that these both, although they're very different media, they're following the same format for presenting the reference information. Who wrote it? When was it published? What's it called? How do you find it? And sometimes there is more detail than other things, like how the video has the square bracket note identifying it as a video, and it has the month and day. But it's the same basic types of information in the same order. So if you were looking at a government website, then you would be asking yourself, okay, well, who made it available? Who published it? When was it published? What's it called? And where do I find it? Now, if we're looking at a book with a single author or a team of authors, it's going to be the same basic format. Who wrote it? When was it published? What's it called? In this case, where do you find it is the publisher name. This used to include city and state, but the nature of publication today and the way that we can identify things doesn't require writing to another city to find the local office of that publisher to get it. Publication is very different. The city and state no longer important or no longer as important for our being able to find the publisher and order a copy of this book. Now, if it's a book chapter, we're going to have a slightly different format because the where do you find it? It requires looking in a larger book. So that's why in this example we have in a period editor, okay, the first initial and then the last name of the editor, and then the title of the book and the page range, then the publisher. But it's still, where do you find it? Oh, in ARIA editor, Middlebrow Woodhouse, that's the title of the book, pages 137 to 166, published by Ashgate Press. Now, journal, we looked at an example of this earlier, so we won't dwell on that. But same basic format. If there is a DOI or URL available, include that. A DOI is preferred. You want to use this format here, https://doi.org. This is the latest APA 7 required format. There are all other older ones that are out there, but this is the one that is current that you should be using in APA 7th edition, which we use at ACU. Now, if it happens that there's an online newspaper article, and if you're working with some communities that are not large enough or established enough or just have not plain been written about in other types of sources, sometimes this is where you'll be getting some information, especially about struggles that they're encountering. So while this isn't preferred, if it's the best option available, it's the best option available. And you probably want to mention that in your paper, saying, oh, yes, there's not a lot written about them, but their plights was highlighted in this thing. And you can see, again, it's who wrote it, when was it published. In this case, because it's a newspaper that comes out every day, we have the year, month, and day, the title of the piece, the publication it's in, the newspaper, the New York Times, and then a URL to get there directly. Now, if it's an online news portal, slightly different, but very close. You can see that here, although it's not a newspaper, it is basically identical in our format. And then podcast. Podcasts are an interesting way that information is becoming available. There's a lot of interviews of public officials even, and public health officials that are now appearing in podcasts. While it is generally more ideal to have a more scholarly or authoritative government source, if that's where the information is, that's where the information is. And YouTube, we talked about this already. So now let's look at how you might be assembling some of these sources together. And for this, I'd like you to go ahead and grab a copy of our APA course paper template, and then let's dive in and look at how you might be first laying out this paper, and second, citing some of these sources. Now I have here a blank copy of our APA course paper template, and you can fill in the title and things like that later. What we're going to do is we're going to start by pasting in the instructions so we make sure that when we're planning out how this paper is organized, it exactly follows what the instructions say we should have. Now this is a great way to start planning your paper because you can see roughly what information goes where and get some idea of how you might plan how much space you spend, where you spend it. So for example, stating this community or population what it is, that's probably going to be briefer. But the other ones, those are going to be at least a paragraph each, and you can look and see, okay, where do I want to spend the most space? Okay, provide a brief background, okay, that's probably going to be a paragraph. Describe the current state of health of the community or population of interest, 1 or 2, probably. Illustrate the impact, probably 1 or 2 as well. So I would venture that these are the places we would probably want to spend the most time. And so you can look at this and say, all right, okay, well, let's start here. I'm going to write about the Hmong American community. Now, there's a choice here. Do I want to make it nationwide? Or do I want to make it local, like, say, in Southern California or in Minnesota? But we know there's going to be some background there. And we're going to describe the state. Okay. And one way to break this down is to look at what is good and what is bad, or what is working well, what is not. And then here to look at and say, okay, well, we should identify the disparities If they haven't been listed already, they should go here. And you can start running through the list here, but one thing I'll put on here for right now is limited use of organ transplants and donations. And this is one of those things where whatever community you select, there will be things that distinguish them as a community, and very rarely do those not cross over somewhere into health and health-seeking behaviors. And that's just as true of European American communities within the United States as it is other groups. All sorts of things will do that, and it's not to say that they're not similar to other groups, but we're trying to figure out how to serve the particular population or community that you identify better than it is now. So let's say if I was writing about this, I'd probably start with, okay, when they became established in the US, probably something about how large it is. Now, if you start on your list here, you can start thinking about how that might be organized and say, okay, well, how large is this community? That's kind of the big picture thing. Maybe we should start with that. And also, going hand in hand with that, where they are. Now, there are other details you might put in here. I'm just using these for the sake of illustration here. But once you start looking at this, you can start asking, oh, well, where is that information on this community? Where is it likely going to be found, given what I've mentioned here? Now, let's take a look at the places you might go looking for this information. Now, let's say that you were looking for information about Dallas, Texas, or a community within Dallas, Texas. Now, you might just start by Googling for demographics of Dallas, Texas. And now we have a choice of different sources to get this information. Now there is something like World Population Review, but I'd like to call attention to you how this 57.75 differs from this line here. So you want to make sure that the source that you're using is giving the most up-to-date things, and because the Wikipedia article is a quaternary source, so several layers removed from where this information came from. And World Population Review is, it is a website that's out there for reference, but it's not as authoritative or as close to the collection as the more official government sources. Well, that's something where if you're looking at something on this level, why not go to the U.S. Census Department, or the U.S. Census Bureau, which is tasked by Congress with collecting accurate information about the United States, who lives there, where they live there, etc. So if you were, say, looking at the Latino community here, you would look at this and say, oh, hey, according to census.gov, their data says that 42% of the city of Dallas's population identifies as Hispanic or Latino. Now, there's some overlaps that you might find here that you might not necessarily see in other sources. If we look at the white alone, not Hispanic or Latino, that's 28.6%. So if we compare that with that 53.8% there, we can see that there is some overlap with different categories here. So this is one of the virtues of going to the authoritative source. So let's say we were going to be citing this. Well, how would this look? Well, we have a couple pieces of information we want to focus on. First, what is the corporate author? There's no person's name signed off for this, so we go for the organization, the government entity. And that's the U.S. Census Bureau. It's their website. They claim authorship by default for all the content here. Is there a publication year? Well, although we can see that the population estimates are for 2022, and we don't actually see a note saying, hey, this was updated on this date. So we would mark this as N period D period. Non datum, which is just Latin for not dated. And what's this page title? Well, that's this information up here, Quick Facts, Dallas City, Texas. That will go as the title, and then we just grab the URL here. So what will that look like? All right, I'm going to paste in our citation information, and it looks pretty good. It's in the right font size, right capitalization, but in APA style, we want our references to have the first line to be flush with the left-hand margin and every line after that to be bumped in half an inch. And so we want to apply the APA reference style up here. And you can see that it switches to do just that thing that I mentioned. Awesome. And if we're going to be citing this, it would be U.S. Census Bureau as the author and N period D period as the publication date. So that would go where the year would normally go. All right, now what about some other types of sources here? Well, if we were looking at, say, looking for information among people, you could do a search on the internet that would show you some sources. Wouldn't necessarily say they're authoritative. That depends on the case. So you probably don't want to be citing the Wikipedia article. It's many things, it's convenient, but it's not what we would call scholarly. Now, on the other hand, the Minnesota Historical Society has served as a publisher for many books about this community because they are a large and significant presence in the state of Minnesota. Now, there are other things here, but if we were hopping over to, say, Google Scholar, we can find, oh, here are a number of books that are about this community. And now we want to look and ask the question, well, okay, how can we get something that talks about the community recently? Because this top result here is from 1999. And, well, that's been more than 20 years since then, and so let's see if we can find something that's, say, from the last 5 years. So let's say we are looking for 2018 to present. And you will find some sources here that are writing about this community. In fact, we have a couple about different health problems. Now, if we decide that we're going to use this for some of our writing, you might just use this cite button here. And this gives you a quick way of copying the citation information. It's not perfect. It's mostly done by algorithms, and algorithms are only as good as the data that they're fed in. And usually the data is, shall we say, not fine-tuned. But it's a start. It will save us some time. So let's go here, and we're going to paste this in here. You see it's not the right font, so we go ahead and we change this to match destination formatting. All right, that is the right font. All right, now this is currently in title case. We should want that in sentence case. So there's a quick way to do this. Up here on the formatting bar, there's this icon with a capital A and a lowercase a. That's a change case button. We can set that, in this case, to lowercase. Ta-da! And do that with this as well. So with just a couple clicks, we've taken care of the capitalization. Now, we saw that as an online article. If we go back and look here, we see that there's a link we can click to get there. So we want to have that link too. As I said, the auto-cite thing, it saves us some time. It's not perfect, but it will get us most of the way there so that we can do these things faster, more efficient than typing it out by hand. So here I can paste that link, and you'll see we only have part of it. So this is the DOI code, and we want to add the prefix https://doi.org/. Then if we just add a space at the end, it turns it into a nice clickable URL. Now, this looks like something where the whole article is not paginated, so you can see it lives natively on the web. So this is why it does not have a page range. But we see here, it has an article number. Let me zoom in a little bit. That's this E9808. So we want that for our reference. And you just add it at the end. So always check to see if it's there. I always hate hearing when people lose points because they didn't check and they just trusted the citation tool. But that's all you need to do to cite that source there. All right, let's go ahead and look back at some of our other options here. So you can see that there are a variety of sources here. And we could get similar results by going to the ACU library portal, which let's do. Now, this is the regular library portal. There's also a distance education portal. And I want you to see the different options that are available to you. Because this portal here, it does start with one search. So this would be the same search as that other screen we're looking at. But we also have a number of different guides and information about accessing sources, contacting our librarians, their help hours, and other things like that that you might be especially interested in. So you can use this Ask Us button to submit a question. During these hours, you can actually ask a question live and get it answered via chat. So, good things to know. Let's go ahead and we will do a search. And if you're doing for the search, let's use a different example here. Let's say we are looking at, okay, I have a student who's from West Africa. And so, let's look for Guinea. And we'll look for Guinean in the United States. Now, I don't know what will come up here. Let's see. Well, there are a lot of results. We're probably going to have to do some sorting down to get here. Talking about global things, community and public health, perhaps. So this is where you might contact our librarians to get help with refining the source. I'm not sure what we'll find, so let's go with it and search for Guinean American, see if that is a search term that will bring up things here. Well, that's not a lot of results. Let's see if we throw in health, if that has anything. This might be too narrow, and this is something that you might discover where the community you have in mind, there just isn't as much information as you'd like, and so you end up selecting a different community for the purpose of this assignment. Now, none of this is really looking in the direction that we want. So, what if we change this to for example, traditional health beliefs of Guinea. So you might be looking at a community of more recent immigrants and looking at what beliefs they have that impact public health. Now, this will tell you about the parent community and not the one that you are looking for. And this is also showing one of the potential complications in that Guinea-Bissau here is very different from Papua New Guinea, which is on the opposite side of the world. So again, this might be something where if there's a community you're really interested in, you want to contact our library staff, and you can contact them through the chat, through email, book an appointment. And they're very helpful, strongly recommended. Alright, so let's do a recap of what we've done so far. We looked at the instructions for this assignment. We talked about how to describe a community or population in APA style, including how to cite and reference your sources, and did some outlining and drafting. So the last thing that I'm going to do is just going to model some of the types of texts that you might write about a public health community, keeping in mind that you only have 500 words to do all the things that you are asked to do here. So we don't want to get too verbose, but let's see what we can come up with. Alright, so I've decided I'm going to write about a different community here. So I spent the last year in Madagascar, so I'm going to write about the Madagascar American community. The Madagascar American or Malagasy American community in the United States is a small but tight-knit community, mostly centered in the Washington, D.C. metro area. And as you're writing this, you may have some research to do to get the correct current numbers, but you can write placeholders with things like this. Okay, so of course you want to have citations for all of this. But you start name the community. Where are they? Are they large in number? Are they small? Are they integrated? Are they separate? Tell us more. And you may find that there's some overlap between this bullet here and this one. That's fine. And you can certainly combine these because the stating which community it is going to be fairly concise. That can be done in a sentence. So you can absolutely bunch it up with this paragraph here. Where are they? Okay, where did they come? And then start filling in. So if you've done up your outline beforehand, you'll have plenty to draw on. And you might even be at the point where you're looking and saying, okay, I have a little too much. Let me cut back so this is very focused to what I do now, what I need to write about right now. But don't throw away anything, because you might be using that text that you wrote, or that portion of the outline that you wrote, as part of the next assignment. Speaking of which, I think it's about time for us to wrap up for the evening. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. You can schedule an appointment by going to my.acu.edu and under the quick links, the list of resources, selecting Online Writing Center and just follow the instructions from there. Or you can go to the Writing Center website itself to watch videos for more webinars like this and find other information. Have a good night.